What starts as a routine flight from Chicago to Las Vegas becomes a race against time when flight attendant Ethan Cooper notices something unusual: a teenage girl named Megan, sitting stiffly beside a man who claims to be her uncle. But one subtle gesture from Megan, a silent signal for help, shatters the illusion of normalcy. Driven by his instincts and haunted by the disappearance of his brother Jacob, Ethan and his team uncover a dark, sprawling network known as Emberfall, a syndicate that thrives in the shadows, using legitimate transport hubs to move more than just people. Their leader, a figure known only as the Director, is always one step ahead, orchestrating his empire with chilling precision. As Ethan dives deeper into the conspiracy, he must face betrayal, unravel cryptic clues, and confront the terrifying possibility that the fight for justice may cost more than he ever imagined. With time running out and lives hanging in the balance, he and his team embark on a dangerous mission to bring down Emberfall once and for all. But Emberfall's reach is vast, and the Director has plans that go far beyond what anyone could have foreseen. Can Ethan outmaneuver an enemy who knows every move before it's made? Or will the final chapter of his story be written in the shadows? Get ready for a heart-pounding journey filled with unexpected twists, moral dilemmas, and a battle for hope in the face of darkness. Now, buckle up. It's time to board Flight 737, the silent call for freedom. Ethan Cooper walked briskly down the aisle of Flight 737, his sharp eyes scanning the rows of passengers. At 32, Ethan was a veteran flight attendant, known for his calm under pressure and an uncanny ability to read people. As the cabin hummed with the sounds of settling passengers, he offered a warm smile to an elderly man struggling to store his luggage. "Let me help you with that," Ethan said, lifting the bag with ease. The flight from Chicago to Las Vegas was supposed to be uneventful, a standard 4-hour journey. But as Ethan reached row 15, his instincts flared. A girl no older than 16 sat by the window. Her long chestnut hair veiled her pale face. Beside her was a man in his mid-40s, wearing a tailored jacket and tinted glasses. His hand rested possessively on the girl's arm. "Is everything all right here?" Ethan asked, maintaining a professional tone. The man glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Everything's fine. My niece and I are just getting comfortable." Ethan's gaze shifted to the girl. Her hands trembled slightly as she fidgeted with the seatbelt. When their eyes met, she tried to look away, but failed. "You'll be in good hands here," Ethan said with a reassuring smile, though his mind raced. There was something off. Returning to the front, Ethan pushed the beverage cart back down the aisle. As he reached row 15 again, he saw her hesitation grow. "Can I get you anything to drink?" he asked, looking at both of them. The man responded without turning his head. "Water for me, soda for her." As Ethan handed her the soda, their fingers briefly touched. Her hand moved subtly, her thumb curled into her palm, fingers forming a small fist. A chill shot down Ethan's spine. It was the exact signal he had learned in his anti-human trafficking training, a silent cry for help. "Understood," Ethan said softly, his heart pounding. As Ethan stepped back, doubt gnawed at him. Was he overreacting? Misinterpreting a nervous teen? But then he remembered the man's grip, the fear in the girl's eyes. Ethan leaned into the galley and whispered to his colleague Madison, "Cover for me. I need to check something." "Everything okay?" Madison asked, her brows furrowing. "Not sure. I think the girl in row 15 signaled for help." Madison's eyes widened, but she nodded. "I'll keep an eye on them. You do what you need to." Ethan hurried to the bathroom and pulled out his phone, accessing the encrypted communication app linked to the cockpit. "Potential code yellow. Row 15. Notify authorities in Las Vegas." A few seconds later, Captain Evelyn Grant's voice crackled through the hidden comm line. "Acknowledged. We'll contact ground control. Stay discreet. If anything escalates, let us know immediately." Ethan inhaled deeply. 2 more hours until landing. He needed to keep the situation contained without alerting the man. But how? As Ethan made his way back, a woman across the aisle caught his attention. She was in her late 30s, wearing glasses and a navy cardigan, unassuming yet watchful. When Ethan passed her row, she murmured, "You noticed it too, didn't you?" Ethan paused. "Yes," he whispered. The woman nodded. "I'm Claire. I teach high school. Something's wrong with that girl." Ethan made a quick decision. "If I need your help, can I count on you?" Claire's jaw set with quiet determination. "Absolutely." As the minutes ticked by, Ethan noticed the man becoming restless. He leaned toward the girl and whispered harshly, "What did you do?" The girl shook her head, eyes wide with fear. "Nothing," she whispered. Ethan clenched his fists, but forced himself to remain calm. If he acted too soon, the man might lash out, or worse, harm her. Ethan approached Madison again. "We need to act. I'll get him out of the seat under a pretense. You and Claire can help the girl when I do." Madison nodded. "The captain is ready to divert if things get bad." Ethan's pulse raced, but he steeled himself. Madison's calm voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing slight turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Claire stood and accidentally dropped her carry-on in front of the man's seat. "Oh, I'm so sorry." The man's attention wavered for just a second as he scowled at her. It was enough. Ethan stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sir, I need to move you to first class. We've had a seating issue, and it's for safety purposes." The man's expression darkened. "No way." "I insist," Ethan said firmly, his heart thundering. As the man reluctantly stood to argue, Madison and another crew member moved quickly to flank him. Claire leaned toward the girl and whispered, "Come with me." Tears welled in the girl's eyes as Claire took her hand and led her toward the rear galley. The girl clung to Claire as Madison wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You're safe now," Madison whispered. "Thank you," she choked out. But as the plane began its descent, Ethan noticed something out of place. A man seated 2 rows back, watching the scene unfold too intently. His fingers drummed rhythmically on his armrest. Ethan's instincts screamed a warning. This isn't over yet. Ethan Cooper's heart thudded in his chest as the plane began its steady descent toward Las Vegas. The man from row 15, Nathan Parker, according to the manifest, had been escorted to first class, grumbling the entire way. Yet something gnawed at Ethan's instincts. It wasn't just Nathan's anger or the girl's fear, it was the man in row 17. He was in his early 40s, wearing a gray hoodie pulled low over his face. His drumming fingers had stopped the second Ethan's gaze landed on him. When their eyes met, the man looked away too quickly, pretending to adjust his headphones. Ethan's stomach churned. Is he watching me or waiting for something? In the rear galley, Claire gently squeezed the girl's shoulder. "You're okay now. What's your name?" The girl's voice was barely above a whisper. "Megan." Madison offered a cup of water. "Here, Megan, take your time." Megan took a small sip, her hand trembling. She blinked back tears, then finally whispered, "He's not my uncle." "He lied. I thought I could get away when we got on the plane, but—" Her voice cracked. Claire leaned in. "You're safe now, Megan." Megan shook her head. "You don't understand. He's not alone." The words hit Ethan like a cold wave. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made his pulse quicken. "Who's with him?" Claire asked softly. Megan swallowed hard. "There was a meeting. I overheard them. One of his friends is on this flight." Ethan's mind raced. "Stay here with Madison," he told Claire and Megan. "Keep her calm." Claire frowned. "Where are you going?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "To find the friend." He returned to the cabin, eyes scanning every row. Most passengers were oblivious, engrossed in movies, books, or conversations. But the man in the gray hoodie, he hadn't moved. His body was rigid, his face half hidden. Ethan moved casually down the aisle, stopping at row 17. "Sir, can I offer you anything before we begin our descent?" The man shook his head, mumbling a curt, "No." His hands were stuffed deep into the hoodie's pocket. Too calm, Ethan thought. As Ethan stepped away, his hand brushed the edge of the seat. He caught a glimpse of something metallic peeking out of the man's carry-on bag beneath his feet, a glint of silver. A phone? Or something worse? Ethan slipped back into the galley and activated the private intercom to the cockpit. "Evelyn, we have another potential threat in row 17, Ethan whispered. Captain Evelyn Grant's voice was steady, though laced with concern. "Understood. Las Vegas police are ready on the ground. We'll maintain the approach. Just don't engage unless it's absolutely necessary." Ethan hesitated. What if he's armed? A beat of silence. Then Evelyn's voice softened. "Stay calm. We're almost there. We can't risk panicking the passengers." Ethan knew they couldn't wait long. If the man in the hoodie made a move before landing, things could spiral fast. He turned to Madison. "I need to borrow Claire." Madison's brow furrowed. "What are you planning?" Ethan's voice dropped. "A distraction." Claire returned to the main cabin and took a seat directly across from the man in the hoodie. Ethan kept his distance, but watched closely. Claire reached into her bag, pulled out a novel, and flipped a few pages before pretending to drop it with a loud thud onto the floor. The man flinched and instinctively looked down at the book. Claire reached under the seat to pick it up, and her hand grazed his carry-on. Her fingers felt something cold and solid. She gave Ethan a sharp glance as she sat back up, confirming his worst fear. Ethan moved quickly. He strode toward the front, signaling to Madison along the way. As he reached the man's row, his face was calm, though his heartbeat pounded in his ears. "Sir, we need you to change seats," Ethan said smoothly. "There's been an issue with your overhead compartment. We'd like to upgrade you to first class." The man's eyes narrowed. "I don't need an upgrade." Ethan leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Actually, it's non-negotiable." The man's hand twitched toward his pocket, and Ethan tensed. Is he reaching for something? Madison appeared behind Ethan. "Is there a problem here?" The man's gaze flicked between Ethan and Madison. His muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. Then suddenly, he stood, but instead of complying, he lunged toward the aisle. Passengers gasped as the man shoved past Ethan and sprinted toward the emergency exit. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He tackled the man from behind just as Madison hit the emergency lock on the door. The two of them crashed into the galley wall. The man's bag spilled open, revealing a stun gun and an untraceable phone. "Stop! Don't move!" Madison shouted. The man thrashed wildly, but Claire grabbed the stun gun before he could reach it. Within seconds, a fellow passenger, an off-duty police officer, rushed forward and helped Ethan pin the man down. As the plane descended toward the runway, the cabin erupted in whispers and murmurs. The man in the hoodie was dragged to the front, subdued and panting. Ethan knelt beside him and whispered, "Game over." The man glared at him with defiance. "You think you've won? Nathan isn't the boss. You've only delayed the inevitable." The plane touched down smoothly as the cabin filled with the sound of relieved applause. Outside, flashing red and blue lights filled the runway. Police officers swarmed the boarding tunnel the moment the doors opened. Nathan was escorted off the plane in handcuffs, raging with fury. The man in the hoodie was taken next, spitting curses under his breath. Megan was led safely to a waiting counselor, tears in her eyes, but a faint smile on her face. As Ethan slumped into an empty seat, exhaustion washed over him. Claire sat beside him and exhaled slowly. "You did it." Ethan shook his head. "We did," Claire smiled. "Still, I think you just saved more than one life today." Ethan's thoughts lingered on the words of the man in the hoodie. Nathan isn't the boss. Something darker lay beneath the surface. And this was only the beginning. The Las Vegas sun blazed on the tarmac as flashing blue and red lights danced across the windows of Flight 737. Ethan Cooper watched silently as Nathan Parker and the man in the hoodie were escorted off the plane in cuffs. The tension in the cabin began to ease, but a knot still coiled tight in his gut. Captain Evelyn Grant appeared at the galley door, her uniform crisp, but her expression grim. "You all right?" Ethan nodded, though exhaustion pressed on his shoulders. "Megan's safe, but it doesn't feel over." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Because it's not." She handed Ethan a slip of paper. "The feds flagged something during the flight. Parker and his associate? They're part of something much bigger. They've been on a watch list for months." Ethan unfolded the paper. Scrawled across it was a single phrase: "Key Transport, Operation Emberfall." The words hit harder than Ethan expected. He'd heard that name before, back when his brother Jacob had been an investigative journalist digging into international trafficking networks. Emberfall was the code name for a global ring that used legitimate transport hubs, airports, railways, even airlines, to move their victims across borders without a trace. Jacob had disappeared 2 years ago while investigating that very network. "Where did this come from?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. Evelyn crossed her arms. "Homeland Security intercepted a coded message Parker sent before boarding." Ethan's blood ran cold. The man in the hoodie wasn't just a random thug, he was backup. Parker had planned for this. A soft voice broke Ethan's spiraling thoughts. "Mr. Cooper?" He turned to see Megan standing with Madison. The girl was pale but determined. I need to tell you something," Megan said, taking a shaky breath. "There's a house near Phoenix. That's where they kept me before they put me on the plane. I saw a man there, a leader. They called him the Director." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "The Director?" Megan nodded. "He was the one in charge. Parker and the others only answered to him." Ethan knelt to Megan's level, his tone soft. "Do you remember anything else? Anything unusual?" Megan hesitated, then reached into the pocket of her jacket. "This." She handed him a small folded business card. Ethan's breath caught. The card was black, with only a red symbol embossed on its surface, a flame encircled by a ring. Madison leaned over his shoulder. "What is that?" "It's their calling card," Ethan muttered. "Jacob found this same symbol before he—" His voice faltered. The weight of his brother's disappearance felt heavier now. Claire joined them, her face pale. "Ethan, if this is the same group, then they've been operating under the radar for years. Megan's survival isn't just a miracle, it's a warning." The plane had been emptied of passengers, but law enforcement officers remained. An agent approached. The woman's badge gleamed in the sunlight. "Agent Diane Holt, FBI." She extended her hand to Ethan. "We'll need Megan to come with us. She's critical to our investigation." Megan clutched Ethan's sleeve. "No! Don't leave me!" Ethan gently knelt beside her. "You're going to be okay, Megan. They'll keep you safe, but I promise I won't stop until this is over." Agent Holt's gaze softened as she took Megan's hand. "You're very brave. We'll take you somewhere secure." As Megan was led toward the waiting SUV, Claire turned to Ethan. "What now?" Ethan stared at the distant mountains. "Now? I dig." Claire hesitated. "You're not thinking of going after them alone, are you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't have a choice. If Parker and the others are just foot soldiers, the real mastermind is still out there." Evelyn stepped forward, crossing her arms. "If you're going after answers, you're not doing it alone. The airline won't officially sanction this, but I can make sure no one tries to stop you. You'll need backup, and you've got mine." Madison nodded. "Mine too." Claire's eyes burned with determination. "Count me in." Ethan pulled out his phone and searched through Jacob's old files, encrypted folders filled with fragmented notes and clues. One entry stood out: "Abandoned airstrip near Lakeview, suspected Emberfall hub." "Lakeview's not far from Phoenix," Ethan muttered. "We checked the airstrip." Claire frowned. You realize they might be expecting us? Ethan's gaze was unwavering. Good. That means we're closer than they think. As they headed toward the airport parking lot, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Turn back. Emberfall is watching. You've been warned. Claire leaned over his shoulder, her face pale. Is that? Ethan clenched his fists. It's them. With a deep breath, Ethan slid into the driver's seat of the rental car. Claire took the passenger side, while Madison and Evelyn shared the back. You know this is crazy, right? Madison said, trying to inject some humor. Ethan smirked grimly. It's not the craziest thing I've done. The sun began to set as they sped down the highway. The horizon blazed with gold and red, casting long shadows across the road. Whatever happens next, Ethan murmured, gripping the steering wheel. We don't stop until we bring them down. Claire reached over, placing a hand on his shoulder. We're with you. As the sky darkened, the thought of his brother's disappearance and Megan's haunting story pushed Ethan forward. He knew they were walking straight into danger, but the stakes were too high to turn back. In the distance, the faint outline of the Lakeview airstrip loomed, forgotten in the desert's twilight. The answers they sought lay hidden in the shadows, but so did their enemies. The headlights cut through the growing darkness as the rental car sped toward the abandoned airstrip near Lakeview. The old runway stretched across the barren landscape like a forgotten scar, surrounded by rusted fences and empty hangars. Ethan Cooper slowed the car to a crawl and parked behind a cluster of scrub bushes. The air was dry, filled with the faint scent of dust and desert sage. Claire, sitting in the passenger seat, peered out into the twilight. Doesn't look like much, she whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's what makes it perfect. Captain Evelyn Grant leaned forward from the back seat. You think they're still using this place? Ethan's eyes swept the dim horizon. Jacob thought so. If Emberfall's still running their operations here, we're about to walk into a hornet's nest. Madison, seated beside Evelyn, adjusted her jacket. Then we better be ready to get stung. The team exited the car and moved silently toward the perimeter. A cold breeze swept across the airstrip, making the loose metal panels on a distant hangar rattle like ghostly whispers. Claire kept pace with Ethan, her eyes alert. What exactly are we looking for? Ethan crouched behind a row of broken crates near the entrance. Anything out of place signs that someone's been here recently. Tire tracks, fresh equipment. Lights. Evelyn scanned the area with sharp precision. Let's split up but stay within sight of each other. The group nodded and fanned out, moving carefully across the cracked concrete. The closer they got to the hangar, the more Ethan's instincts screamed. Claire was the first to notice something strange. She knelt by a patch of dirt near the hangar doors and ran her fingers over the grooves in the ground. Tracks. Heavy ones. Ethan joined her and frowned. Tires recent. Probably within the last 24 hours. Madison's voice was low but urgent. Over here. The team hurried to where Madison stood, pointing toward the far end of the hangar. A faint glow emanated from beneath a side door, barely visible through the cracks in the metal. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Looks like someone's home. Ethan glanced at his team. We're going in, but quietly. No sudden moves. If this is their hub, we need to figure out what they're doing here. Claire's hand hovered near the pepper spray she carried, while Madison gripped a flashlight with white knuckles. Ethan approached the door, testing the handle. It wasn't locked. He exchanged a cautious glance with Evelyn, then pushed it open just enough for them to slip inside. The hangar was larger than it appeared from the outside. Rows of crates lined the walls, stacked high and marked with numbers in an unfamiliar code. A makeshift office with computers and monitors sat in one corner, their screens glowing faintly. Claire whispered, "What is this place?" Ethan stepped closer to one of the crates and pried it open. His breath caught in his throat. Inside were bundles of fake passports, cash, and untraceable phones tools for trafficking victims to vanish without a trace. Evelyn crossed to the desk and picked up a small tablet lying among scattered papers. "Check this out." She tapped the screen, and a video began to play. A man's face filled the screen, shadowed but unmistakably authoritative. His voice was calm yet laced with menace. "To all Emberfall operatives, our shipments are secure. The director's plan proceeds on schedule. We leave no loose ends." The screen flickered and went dark. Madison shivered. "That's him, isn't it? The director." Ethan nodded grimly. "He's the one calling the shots. And we're standing in the middle of one of his operations." A metallic clink echoed from the far end of the hangar. The team froze. Claire whispered, "Did you hear that?" Another clink, closer this time. Ethan motioned for everyone to stay low. His eyes scanned the dim hangar until he saw movement shadows shifting behind the crates. "Someone's here," Evelyn whispered, her hand tightening on her radio. Before Ethan could signal a retreat, a voice boomed through the hangar. "You're trespassing." A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man wearing a tactical vest. His face was hardened, his eyes cold. "Step away from the crates, hands where I can see them," he barked, raising a weapon. Ethan raised his hand slowly, exchanging a quick glance with Claire. She nodded almost imperceptibly. The man stepped closer, his weapon trained on them. "You shouldn't have come here." Ethan's voice was steady. "We're not here to stop you. We're here for information. We know about Emberfall." The man's eyes narrowed. "If you know about Emberfall, then you're already dead." Claire moved fast, too fast for the man to react. She grabbed a nearby wrench and swung it hard, knocking the weapon from his hands. Madison lunged forward, helping pin him to the ground. Ethan knelt beside the man, his voice sharp. "Where's the director?" The man coughed but sneered. "You think you can stop this? You're already too late." Evelyn stepped closer. "What's the next move?" The man's grin widened, blood staining his teeth. "You'll find out soon enough." Ethan felt a chill as the man's laughter echoed through the hangar. Claire whispered, "Ethan, what if he's right?" Ethan clenched his fists. "Then we find the director before he makes his next move." Evelyn's voice cut in. "We need to get out of here. If they're watching, we don't have much time before reinforcements arrive." Ethan nodded. "Grab what we can, files, hard drives, anything." They moved quickly, gathering every scrap of evidence they could find. As they exited the hangar, the distant sound of engines roaring to life sent adrenaline surging through their veins. Madison gasped. "They're coming." Ethan turned to his team. "Run!" The team sprinted across the airstrip as headlights appeared in the distance. Dust kicked up around them as dark SUVs barreled toward the hangar. Ethan's heart pounded as they reached the rental car. "Go, go, go!" Claire slid into the passenger seat, slamming the door as Ethan floored the gas pedal. The car shot forward, tires screeching as they sped away from the airstrip. The SUVs followed, their headlights cutting through the darkness like twin predators closing in. The rental car roared down the deserted highway, its engine straining as Ethan Cooper pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The headlights of the pursuing SUVs glared in the rearview mirror like twin wolves closing in on their prey. Dust and sand whipped through the night air, clouding the dark horizon. Claire sat in the passenger seat, bracing herself against the door. "We're not going to outrun them." Madison twisted in her seat, watching the SUVs gain ground. "They're getting closer." Captain Evelyn Grant's voice was calm but urgent. "We need a plan, fast." Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. "We can't lead them straight back to Vegas. We need to lose them in the open desert." Claire's eyes flicked to the GPS on the dashboard. "There's an old service road up ahead leads into the hills. If we take it, they'll lose visibility in the canyons." Ethan nodded. "Buckle up." The car fishtailed as Ethan veered sharply to the right, cutting onto the narrow service road. The headlights of the SUVs swerved in pursuit, bouncing wildly as they followed. The service road was uneven, cracked from years of abandonment. Rocks and brush crowded the narrow path, but the walls of the canyon began to rise, narrowing their surroundings. Madison gripped the edge of her seat. If they corner us here, Evelyn leaned forward. Then we don't let them. She reached into her bag and pulled out an emergency flare gun from the aircraft's safety kit. Claire's eyes widened. That's not standard issue. Evelyn cracked a small grin. Always be prepared. She rolled down her window and aimed carefully. The flare shot into the air with a sharp pop, trailing a brilliant arc of red fire before slamming into the windshield of the lead SUV. The driver swerved wildly, blinded by the burning light. The SUV careened off the side of the road, slamming into a cluster of rocks with a metallic crunch. Madison whooped. One down. The second SUV didn't slow. Its engine roared louder as it surged forward, now only a few yards behind. Ethan's eyes flicked to Claire. Is there another way out of this canyon? Claire scanned the GPS. There's a fork about half a mile ahead. If we split up, Evelyn cut in. We can force them to divide. They won't know who to follow. Madison hesitated. But who takes the decoy route? Ethan's jaw set. I will. Claire's eyes widened. Ethan, no. He shook his head. If they're after me, they'll follow. You all need to get those files somewhere safe. The fork in the road came into view, a sharp split in the canyon path. Ethan slammed the brakes, causing the car to skid in a cloud of dust. He threw the car into park and jumped out. Get in the driver's seat, he shouted to Claire as he tossed her the keys. Claire caught them, her face pale but determined. You better meet us on the other side. Ethan's smirk was faint but reassuring. I will. He took off down the right fork on foot as Claire gunned the engine, speeding down the left. The SUV's driver hesitated for a second before roaring down the right path, headlights locked onto Ethan. Ethan's lungs burned as he sprinted across the rocky ground, his footsteps pounding in rhythm with his heartbeat. He could hear the SUV's tires grinding behind him, closing in. Up ahead, the canyon narrowed before sloping into a sharp drop-off, a dead end. Ethan's mind raced. Think. Move. Don't stop. He spotted a narrow ledge just below the drop-off. Without a second thought, he leaped into the void, landing hard on the narrow ledge below. The impact sent pain shooting up his leg, but he gritted his teeth and rolled to safety. The SUV reached the edge but couldn't stop in time. Its wheels skidded, and the vehicle tumbled over the cliffside, crashing in a burst of twisted metal below. Ethan lay flat, catching his breath as the dust settled. Meanwhile, Claire, Evelyn, and Madison sped down the winding canyon road. The path eventually opened into a clearing where the faint glow of distant city lights lit the sky. Claire slowed the car, her hands trembling slightly. We need to wait for him. Evelyn scanned the ridges above. He's resourceful. He'll find us. Minutes passed in tense silence. Finally, a shadowed figure emerged from the side of the road, limping but unmistakably familiar. Claire threw open the door and ran toward him. Ethan! He waved weakly. I told you, I'd meet you. Claire helped him into the car, her eyes shimmering with relief. Don't scare me like that again. Ethan gave her a faint grin. No promises. As they drove toward the safety of the city, Ethan pulled out his phone and scrolled through the photos he'd taken at the airstrip. One image stood out, a map pinned to the wall in the hangar. It wasn't just a map of the Southwest, it was marked with multiple locations. Claire noticed his expression. What is it? Ethan's voice was grim. This wasn't their main hub. It's just one of many. Madison's breath caught. You mean, there's more? Evelyn nodded, her face hardening. The director's network is bigger than we thought. Ethan's phone buzzed again, with a new message from the unknown number. You're getting close, but you won't win. Claire shivered. They know we're still coming. Ethan's gaze hardened as he stared into the night. Good, let them know. The city lights of Phoenix shimmered in the distance as Ethan Cooper guided the car toward a safe house on the outskirts of town. The adrenaline from the desert chase still hummed in his veins, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavy on his mind. Claire sat silently in the passenger seat, her arms crossed, staring out at the night sky. Madison and Captain Evelyn Grant remained quiet in the back, processing the events of the past few hours. Ethan broke the silence. The map at the airstrip. Those locations, they weren't random. Claire turned, concern etched across her face. You think each location is part of Emberfall's network? Ethan nodded. We need to figure out their next move before they disappear again. But first, we regroup. The safe house was an inconspicuous single-story home, hidden in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Agent Diane Holt, the FBI contact they had met earlier, greeted them at the door. You all made it out alive, Holt said, ushering them inside. That's more than I expected. Trust me, it wasn't easy, Madison muttered, dropping onto a worn couch. Holt gestured toward a table spread with photos, files, and a laptop displaying a digital map. We've been tracking Emberfall's movements for months, but they've always been a step ahead. Ethan studied the photos of missing people, their faces hauntingly familiar to Megan's story. Claire's voice was quiet, but firm. Megan mentioned, the director. Do you have anything on him? Holt hesitated, then pulled out a photo. It was grainy and slightly blurred, but the figure was unmistakable tall, with an imposing presence. His face was partially obscured, but his sharp eyes burned with menace. That's him, Ethan said, his heart sinking. The same man Jacob was tracking. Holt tapped the laptop screen, zooming in on the map. We intercepted another message after your encounter at the airstrip. It mentioned a convergence point. Evelyn leaned forward. What does that mean? Holt pointed to a marked location. Red Ridge Industrial Complex. This old processing plant outside the city. It was shut down years ago, but satellite images show recent activity. Madison frowned. So that's where they're regrouping? Possibly, Holt said. But if it's true, they're planning something big. As they continued scanning the files, Claire's eyes widened. Wait, here. She pointed to a document listing known Emberfall collaborators. Her voice trembled. Nathan Parker wasn't their top operative. This name, Charles Harlan. Ethan froze. The name struck like a lightning bolt. Harlan? Are you sure? Claire nodded. It's listed here as one of their financial backers. Do you know him? Ethan's jaw clenched. He used to work with Jacob before he disappeared. They were friends, until Jacob started digging into Emberfall. Madison whispered, You think Harlan betrayed him? I don't know. Ethan's voice was hard. But if he's involved, he may be the key to finding the director. Holt pulled out her phone and made a call. I can send backup, but you know how long that takes with bureaucracy. If you're planning to hit Red Ridge tonight, you're going in mostly alone. Ethan exchanged a glance with Claire, Madison, and Evelyn. Each of them nodded, resolute. Ethan took a breath. We've come this far. We're not stopping now. Holt's expression softened. Just be careful. Emberfall doesn't play fair. Ethan allowed himself a brief, wry smile. Neither do we. 2 black SUVs were parked in the driveway, ready for the mission. The team loaded their supplies, flashlights, first aid kits, and the evidence they'd gathered. Just as they were about to head out, Evelyn's phone buzzed. She answered, stepping a few feet away. Her face hardened as she listened. When she returned, her expression was tense. That was my contact in Air Command. They intercepted a message the director knows we're coming. Claire's brow furrowed. How? A heavy silence fell. Ethan's mind raced. Someone's been feeding them information. His eyes swept over the team. Holt's expression darkened. Are you suggesting we have a mole? Before anyone could respond, the sound of a car engine revving filled the driveway. Ethan's instincts flared as he spun around. One of their SUVs was peeling out onto the street, tires screeching. Madison shouted, "Someone's taking the car!" Ethan sprinted after the fleeing vehicle but stopped short as a familiar figure leaned out of the window, Agent Holt. Claire's gasp cut through the night. "No, it can't be." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Holt's the mole." The realization hit hard. Holt had been feeding them just enough information to stay useful, and now she was escaping with their files. "We can't let her get away!" Madison yelled, jumping into the remaining SUV. Ethan jumped in beside her. "Claire, Evelyn, stay back and monitor. We'll bring her down." Claire hesitated but nodded. "Be careful." Madison floored the gas pedal, and the SUV lurched forward in pursuit. Holt's vehicle swerved through the quiet suburban streets, headlights flashing like angry beacons. Ethan's pulse pounded as they closed the gap. "She knows every move we've made. If she reaches Emberfall, it's over." Madison's grip tightened on the wheel. "Then we end this now." She veered sharply, cutting across an empty lot to block Holt's path. Holt's SUV skidded, tires screeching as it slammed into a fence. Holt stumbled out of the driver's seat, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. She reached for her sidearm, but Ethan was faster. "Don't!" Ethan shouted, aiming his own weapon. Holt froze, her eyes wild. "You don't understand. Emberfall isn't just a network, it's a system. If you bring me in, someone worse will take my place." Ethan's voice was cold. "We'll take our chances." Madison stepped forward, zip tie in hand. "Time to answer for what you've done." As Holt was restrained, she gave a bitter laugh. "You think you've won? You're still in their game. You have no idea how deep this goes." Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. "Then it's time we find out." The safe house was cloaked in an uneasy silence as Ethan Cooper and Madison led Agent Diane Holt inside. Her wrists were secured in front of her, but her posture remained defiant. A faint scratch ran across her forehead, but she barely noticed it. Instead, she wore a self-satisfied smirk, as if she knew something they didn't. Claire and Captain Evelyn Grant stood by the table, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Why, Diane?" Evelyn's voice was tight with emotion. "You were supposed to be one of us." Holt exhaled slowly as she sat down. "You think you're fighting the whole war when all you've seen is one battle. Emberfall doesn't just move people, they shift power, secrets, influence. You don't stop something like that by playing hero." Claire stepped closer, her expression sharp. "Then tell us the truth. What's the director's endgame?" Holt's eyes flickered, as if weighing her words. "The director isn't just maintaining an empire, he's building a legacy. Emberfall's strength comes from control, not chaos. Anyone who's become inconvenient, anyone who knows too much, they're being removed." Madison's breath caught. "Removed?" Ethan clenched his jaw. "Megan, she's a target, isn't she?" Holt hesitated for a second before giving a slow nod. Claire's voice trembled. "They're planning to silence her." The truth hung heavy in the room. Evelyn crossed her arms tightly. "Then we need to warn the Bureau, tell them to protect her." Holt let out a bitter chuckle. "You think you can trust the system? Emberfall has their claws in places you wouldn't believe. If Megan's still alive, she's only alive long enough to draw you in. The director's expecting you to come." The room fell silent. Ethan's gaze sharpened. "Then we don't wait for their trap, we take control." Madison frowned. "We can't rush in blind." Claire nodded. "We need intel, not just courage." Ethan turned to Holt. "Tell us what you know. Where's the director? How do we find him?" For the first time, Holt's confidence wavered. "You can't take on Emberfall without a lead. But there is someone who can get you closer. Charles Harlan." Ethan's expression darkened. "Harlan. I knew it." Claire tilted her head. "You've met him?" Ethan's voice was quiet, but firm. "He was close to my brother before everything went wrong. If anyone knows where the director is, it's Harlan." Madison's arms crossed defensively. Why should we trust anything you say? Holt leaned forward slightly. Because you have no other choice, and if you're serious about stopping Emberfall, you're going to need what I know. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. And what do you want in return? Holt's smile was thin. A guarantee, a way out when this is over. Ethan exchanged a glance with Claire and Madison. If your information saves Megan, we'll talk about options. But if this is a lie, Claire's voice was steely. You won't get far. Holt gave them an address, a private estate on the outskirts of Scottsdale, belonging to Charles Harlan. It's where he stays when things get too risky for him elsewhere, Holt said. He doesn't trust digital communication, he keeps everything offline. Ethan grabbed the car keys. Claire, Madison, you're with me. Evelyn, you stay here with Holt. If we're not back in 2 hours, call in backup. Evelyn nodded, though worry clouded her features. Be careful. Claire's hand rested on Ethan's arm. We'll bring her back. The ride to Scottsdale was quiet, tension thick in the air. The streetlights blurred past, but Ethan's focus was locked on the mission. Memories of Jacob's investigations mixed with Holt's warning and the haunting image of Megan's terrified face. The estate was tucked behind a gated entrance, surrounded by towering hedges. The lights were off, but Ethan knew better than to assume the place was empty. Looks quiet, Madison murmured as they parked a block away. Too quiet, Claire agreed. They moved along the side gate, their footsteps light against the gravel. Claire studied the security panel and tapped a few keys. A soft beep signaled the system had been overridden. Let's go, she whispered. They entered the side door, slipping into the dimly lit hallway. The inside was elegant but cold marble floors, art-covered walls, and an unsettling stillness. Madison's voice was low. Where is he? A soft sound drifted from a nearby room, the scrape of a chair against the floor. Ethan opened the door cautiously. Inside, a man sat slumped in an armchair near a fireplace. His face was pale, and his eyes flickered toward them weakly. Harlan, Ethan said quietly. Claire stepped closer, concern in her voice. He looks unwell. Harlan took a slow, uneven breath. You shouldn't have come. Ethan knelt beside him. Where is the director? Where's Megan? Harlan's gaze drifted to a map on the wall. Red Ridge. It's not just a place. It's a message. Madison's expression darkened. What kind of message? Harlan's voice was barely audible. They're planning to make an example. Time's almost out. Claire's eyes widened. A mass operation. Ethan's heart sank. We need to move now. Madison's hand tightened into a fist. Then let's end this before it's too late. As they helped Harlan to his feet, a faint noise came from outside, the soft hum of approaching engines. Ethan's breath caught. They're here. Claire's voice was calm, but urgent. We need to get out of here. Ethan's mind raced as they prepared to leave. The director's web was tightening, but this time they were ready to fight back. The SUV sped down the dark highway, the hum of the tires blending with the steady drum of Ethan Cooper's pulse. The faint glow of city lights disappeared in the rearview mirror as the open desert stretched before them. Claire sat beside Ethan, her fingers tracing the edge of the map they'd taken from Harlan's estate. Red Ridge Industrial Complex, she muttered, staring at the circled location. It's in the middle of nowhere. Madison glanced back from the rear seat. That's why they chose it. No one to notice what they're doing. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. We'll stop them before they can hurt anyone. Claire's voice was soft, but resolute. We have to. The Red Ridge Industrial Complex came into view, an eerie silhouette of rusted metal and long-forgotten machinery. Faint lights flickered near the main warehouse, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Ethan pulled the SUV into a shallow ravine a few hundred yards away. We go in quiet, he said, cutting the engine. Madison nodded. How many people do you think are inside? Claire peered through binoculars. Hard to tell, but if this is the convergence point Holt mentioned, it's more than just guards. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then we stick to the plan. We find Megan, gather any evidence we can, and stop the director's operation from the inside. They moved in single file, keeping to the shadows as they approached the side entrance of the complex. The door was ajar, swaying slightly in the night breeze. Madison raised an eyebrow. That's not a good sign. Ethan pushed the door open cautiously. The interior was dimly lit, filled with the metallic scent of old machinery and dust. Stacks of crates were arranged in long rows, creating a maze of narrow corridors. Claire whispered, "Look at the markings." She pointed to the crates, each stamped with a red circle surrounding a flame. Emberfall's symbol. Madison's eyes darkened. This place is a hub. As they moved deeper into the warehouse, a faint sound reached their ears, a soft hum of machinery. And something else. Claire stopped abruptly. Did you hear that? Ethan held up a hand, signaling silence. A moment later, he heard it too. A soft, rhythmic tapping. A signal? They followed the sound to a small room tucked at the end of the corridor. Inside, Megan sat on a metal chair, her hands resting on her knees. She looked up, her eyes widening as she saw them. Megan! Claire rushed forward and knelt beside her. Megan's voice trembled with relief. You found me. Ethan scanned the room. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? Megan shook her head. No, but they're coming. They know you're here. Before anyone could respond, a loudspeaker crackled to life. A voice, calm and composed, filled the warehouse. Welcome, Mr. Cooper. You've come far. But you're too late. Claire's breath caught. That's him. Ethan's jaw tightened. The director. The voice continued. You thought you could stop this? You're just one small piece in a much larger puzzle. But since you're here, you might as well see how it ends. Madison's eyes darted around the room. What's he talking about? Ethan's gaze landed on a digital timer embedded in the wall. His heart sank. It was counting down. That's a timer, Claire whispered, horror dawning in her eyes. He's set the whole place to detonate. Megan's hands gripped Claire's arm. We have to go. Ethan's mind raced. We're not leaving empty-handed. Madison, find any files or computers we can use. Madison nodded and sprinted to a nearby desk, grabbing a flash drive already connected to a laptop. Claire helped Megan to her feet. We need to move now. Ethan led the way back through the maze of crates. The red glow of the countdown bathed the warehouse in an eerie light, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and twist. As they reached the exit, the faint sound of engines rumbled outside. Claire's heart sank. More of them. They're closing in. Ethan's eyes locked onto a side door that led to a loading dock. We'll take the service road, stay low, and stick together. They burst through the door, the cold desert air biting against their skin. The loading dock led to a gravel path winding toward the hills. The countdown continued to flash ominously behind them, the timer ticking closer to 0. Megan stumbled, but Ethan caught her. We're almost there. Claire's voice was steady. We have to believe in this. We're not giving up now. As they reached the SUV, a distant rumble came from the complex. An explosion lit up the night sky in a burst of red and orange, sending dust and debris into the air. Ethan shielded Megan as the shockwave rippled past. They stood in silence, watching the remnants of the complex smolder in the distance. Madison held up the flash drive. We've got everything they were hiding. Claire exhaled, steadying herself. Megan's safe. That's what matters. Ethan placed a hand on Megan's shoulder. You're going to be okay now. Megan looked up at him, her eyes glistening. Because of you, I am. As they drove away, Ethan's phone buzzed with a new message. You may have won a battle, But the war is far from over. Claire read the message over his shoulder. It's him. Ethan's gaze hardened as the city lights came back into view. Then we're not done yet. The SUV cruised down the quiet highway, headlights cutting through the early morning mist. The desert behind them was still shrouded in smoke from the explosion, a grim reminder of how close they'd come to disaster. Inside the car, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. Megan had fallen asleep, her head resting against Claire's shoulder. The weight of exhaustion finally pulled her into a fragile peace. Madison drove in silence, her fingers steady on the wheel. Ethan stared at the flash drive in his hand, the small device that held the key to everything, their proof, their lead, and perhaps the final piece of his brother Jacob's investigation. Claire broke the silence. Do you think the director saw this coming? Ethan exhaled slowly. He wanted us to survive that. The explosion wasn't just a trap, it was a message. Madison's voice was grim. A message that this isn't over. They pulled into the driveway of the safe house just as dawn broke, the sky painted in soft pinks and golds. Evelyn Grant was waiting at the door, her face tense with worry. When she saw Megan step out of the car unharmed, she released a slow breath of relief. "Megan!" Evelyn rushed to her and wrapped her in a soft embrace. Megan blinked up, still groggy. "Is it really over?" Evelyn's eyes softened. "You're safe now. We'll make sure of it." Inside the safe house, Madison plugged the flash drive into the laptop. Lines of encrypted files filled the screen. Claire leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the code. "These files aren't just transport records," Claire murmured. "It's a blueprint. Emberfall's entire network, their hubs, their safe houses, and their next targets." Ethan's pulse quickened. This could bring them down for good. Madison's eyes widened as she clicked through the folders. "Wait, look at this." She opened a file labeled Project Embers. The document listed familiar cities, Chicago, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and one final location that made Claire's breath catch. Silver Creek Refuge. Claire looked up, stunned. That's an outreach shelter. They're planning to go after a safe house for trafficking survivors. Evelyn's expression hardened. They're not just tying up loose ends, they're sending a message to anyone who tries to fight back. Before anyone could respond, Ethan's phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. He hesitated for only a second before answering. A familiar, calm voice spoke. "Hello, Mr. Cooper." Ethan's heart pounded. "The director." The others froze, listening in tense silence. The director's voice remained unnervingly composed. "You've done well to make it this far, but you're still chasing shadows. You think you've won because you saved one girl? You've only delayed the inevitable." Ethan's jaw clenched. "We have your files. We know your next move." A soft chuckle came through the line. "Then you know that Silver Creek won't be standing much longer. You can't save everyone." Ethan's voice was steel. "Watch me." The line went dead. Madison slammed the laptop shut. "He wants us to think we can't stop him. But we can." Claire's eyes flashed with determination. "We have to get to Silver Creek before they do. If they destroy that shelter, it'll destroy hope for so many others." Evelyn grabbed her jacket. "We're done playing defense. We move now." Ethan nodded. "We know where they're going. We have the element of surprise this time." The team packed quickly, checking their supplies before loading into the SUV. The sun had fully risen by the time they hit the road, the golden light stretching across the open desert. Megan stayed behind with federal agents who had arrived to secure the safe house. As they drove, the tension was palpable. Madison glanced at Ethan. "Do you think the director will be there?" Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the road ahead. If he's willing to make this much noise, he won't be hiding in the shadows. He'll be watching. Claire added softly, "and waiting." As the miles passed, memories of Jacob crept into Ethan's mind, the laughter they'd shared growing up, Jacob's relentless drive to uncover the truth. He'd always said, "If we don't stand up for the voiceless, Who will? Ethan whispered the words under his breath. Claire glanced at him. What did you say? Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Jacob knew what this fight would cost, but he never gave up, and neither will we. Halfway to Silver Creek, their radio crackled. Evelyn adjusted the frequency. This is Agent Lewis from the Regional Task Force. We've been monitoring Ember Falls movements. We're on standby if you need backup. Ethan exchanged a look with Claire. We could use all the help we can get. Agent Lewis's voice was steady. Understood. We'll have tactical teams positioned nearby. You're not alone in this. Evelyn's eyes softened. Finally, reinforcements. As the sun climbed higher, Silver Creek Refuge came into view, a modest building surrounded by a cluster of trees, its simple design symbolizing hope for survivors. Claire whispered, "It looks so peaceful." Ethan parked the SUV and exhaled. That's what they're counting on. The team stepped out, scanning the area for any signs of trouble. Madison's voice was low. We're ready for this. Ethan nodded, his resolve unshaken. No more running, no more fear. As they approached the building, the quiet air seemed to hold its breath. This wasn't just another mission. It was a stand for everyone who had ever been silenced, manipulated, or abandoned. Ethan's voice was firm as he turned to his team. We stopped them here. Claire's eyes locked onto his. Together. The team moved forward, knowing the fight ahead would test every ounce of their strength, but determined that this time, Emberfall would fall. The warm desert air pressed down on the Silver Creek Refuge, thick with a tension that vibrated in the stillness. The shelter's front entrance was quiet, but the shadows among the trees shifted as Ethan Cooper and his team moved into position. Every step felt like the final page of a story that had started long before this day, with Jacob's disappearance, Megan's cry for help, and the director's ever-watching presence. Claire crouched behind a low wall, eyes scanning the tree line. No movement yet, but that doesn't mean we're alone. Madison checked her comms, her expression tense. The task force teams are ready to move in once we confirm the situation inside. Ethan exhaled slowly. We're not letting the director slip away this time. Evelyn Grant's voice was calm but resolute. We've come too far to lose now. Ethan nodded, his gaze hardening. Let's end this. The front door of the refuge was slightly ajar, swaying in the soft breeze. Ethan motioned for the team to follow, as he pushed it open cautiously. The inside was bright and welcoming, simple furniture, soft lighting, and quiet hallways that led to private rooms. Claire whispered, It looks normal. Madison's brows furrowed. Too normal. The air felt charged, as though the room itself was holding its breath. A speaker above them crackled to life. The same composed voice that haunted Ethan's dreams spoke again. Welcome to Silver Creek. Ethan's pulse quickened as the director continued, his voice smooth and detached. You've done well, Mr. Cooper. You've made it here faster than I anticipated. But you're still too late. Madison clenched her fists. He's toying with us. The voice softened. You think you can save them all? You can't. Every system in place, every plan, was designed to outlast you. But I give you credit for trying. Ethan didn't waste time responding. We split up, find the survivors. Make sure everyone gets out. The team spread out, moving through the quiet hallways. Madison opened doors, calling softly for anyone inside. Claire scanned the rooms for anything suspicious. Evelyn covered their rear, watching for signs of an ambush. Ethan reached a room at the end of the hall. Inside, he found 2 women and a child huddled together, eyes wide with fear. It's okay, Ethan said gently, stepping closer. We're here to help. One of the women nodded slowly. They told us no one was coming. Ethan's heart tightened. Well, they were wrong. We're getting you out. As the team led the survivors toward the exit, A series of soft clicks echoed through the building doors locking, gates closing. Claire turned sharply. "He's sealing us in!" The director's voice returned. "You really think I'd make it that easy? This refuge was a symbol, but now it will be a reminder of what happens when you defy Emberfall." Ethan's mind raced. "We have to override the system." Madison's eyes lit with determination. "The control room, I saw a panel near the office. I can disable the locks from there." Claire grabbed Ethan's arm. "Go with her. Evelyn and I will get the survivors outside." Ethan hesitated but nodded. "Be careful." Madison led Ethan to the control room, where a sleek digital panel glowed faintly. She immediately started typing, her fingers flying across the keys. Ethan kept watch, his eyes scanning the door. "How long?" "Almost there," Madison muttered. "But he's got layers of encryption. Whoever built this knew what they were doing." The intercom crackled again. "Miss Hayes, such skill. A shame you chose the wrong side." Madison ignored the voice, narrowing her focus. "I've almost got it." Ethan's jaw clenched. "He's trying to rattle us." The locks released with a faint click. Madison smiled triumphantly. "We're clear!" Before Ethan could respond, the door behind them opened and a tall figure stepped inside. Ethan's breath caught. The man was sharp-featured, dressed in a tailored suit, his eyes calm yet calculating. "The director," Ethan whispered. The director smiled faintly. "In the flesh." Madison's hand hovered near her comms. "You're surrounded. Surrender now, and this ends peacefully." The director chuckled softly. "Peacefully? I don't think you understand, Miss Hayes. I've already won." Ethan stepped forward. "You've lost. We have your files. Your network's exposed." The director's eyes darkened. "Do you really think this end with me? Emberfall is more than one person, it's an idea. You can't destroy an idea." Ethan's voice was steady. "But we can stop people from believing in it." The director paused, as if considering Ethan's words. "Perhaps, but you've already lost something far more valuable: time." Madison's comm crackled. "Ethan, the task force is moving in." "Reinforcements are here!" Claire's voice was urgent but confident. The director's calm facade finally cracked. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallways as agents swept into the building. The director's eyes flickered with something almost human defeat. Ethan stepped closer. "It's over." The director's lips pressed into a thin line. "Perhaps, for now." Agents moved in and restrained him, guiding him out of the room. Madison exhaled shakily. "We did it." Outside, the sun was rising fully, casting a warm glow over Silver Creek Refuge. Survivors sat under blankets, speaking quietly with agents and counselors. Claire approached Ethan, her face tired but relieved. "The director's in custody, and Megan's safe." Ethan looked out over the scene, his heart finally steady. Jacob would have wanted this, to fight until the end. Madison placed a hand on his shoulder. "And because of you, the fight didn't end with him." As they watched the survivors begin to rebuild, Ethan felt the weight of the past lift. Emberfall's network had fallen, but their story wasn't just about stopping a villain. It was about giving people their lives back. Claire leaned in. "What now?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Now, we make sure no one else goes through what Megan did." The first rays of sunlight warmed the ground beneath their feet, and for the first time in a long time, hope felt real. As the first rays of sunlight warmed the ground beneath their feet, Ethan, Claire, Madison, and Evelyn stood in quiet reflection. Emberfall's reign of terror had ended, but their mission to protect the innocent was far from over. Hope had been restored, but their story served as a reminder that courage and vigilance could make all the difference in a world filled with shadows. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more gripping tales of courage, justice, and resilience, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything, and it helps us continue to create stories that inspire and captivate. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new adventure. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember, every act of courage starts with a single choice. Subscribe now and be part of our storytelling community.